KOMU8's John Murphy takes us back to this pivotal moment in Missouri history a quarter century later.
In the back of our news station is an old studio. It hasn't been used in decades. In this dark, typically empty space, we brought old history to new light.
So we had Senator Ashcroft, we had Governor Carnahan, two statewide figures with statewide stages and well known to voters. And that set the groundwork for what came in 2000.
Setting the scene today is Scott Charton. He knew this race as well as anyone, having covered Missouri politics for more than a decade as a reporter for the Associated Press.
That was my first experience with Mel Carnahan. He was lieutenant governor, and John Ashcroft was governor when I got to Missouri.
When he got to this old, dark studio, he brought a recount of history with him, but not just history as he recalls it.
We want to reflect over time about what this big event meant to the state. It's a lot of material.
It is a collection of about 30 interviews Charton and a small team conducted several years ago about Mel Carnahan and the 2000 Senate race.
So we did approach our team, the Carnahan family. We thought it was important to interview them.
And they did. Mel's daughter Robin shared a memory with Charton about how her father approached government.
I remember my first few months there, I was so frustrated because government was big and slow and it was hard to get anybody's attention and to do anything. And I remember coming home and complaining about it, and he sat me down and said, you know, most times in life, it's like you're in a big ship, you're a passenger, and somebody else is steering, but every now and then you get to steer. And when you get to steer, you can make just a small course correction, but the difference that makes on this long journey will be really big.
That journey to the Senate in 2000 was not going to be an easy one.
You'll recall 98 was a rough cycle for Republicans. So we knew that we were going to have our work cut out. I think Mel Carnahan entering that race so forcefully, so early, was one of the factors that brought John Ashcroft back home to run that race against Carnahan and win. The two of them had a history that was not a whole lot of love lost between the two on either side. And that shaped up to be, if you just look at the history of U.S. Senate races in Missouri, that thing was, you know, that was the major leagues.
Major League Baseball's St. Louis Cardinals faced elimination in the playoffs to the Mets in New York on the night of Monday, October 16th.
He has in each of the last 3 games.
Meanwhile, much closer to Busch Stadium, Mel Carnahan faced just a short plane ride from St. Louis to a campaign event in New Madrid in the Boot Heel. St. Louis Police Detective Tom Malachek walked with Carnahan to the plane at the Cahokia Airfield. It was drizzling out.
Okay, good. He said, I'll see you tomorrow morning, then we're going to do it again. And I said, okay, great, we're looking forward to it. So closed the door on the plane, and that was the last I've seen of him.
It's an NBC 8 News special report, a Missouri tragedy, the death of Governor Mel Carnahan.
Last night's fatal plane crash shocked people in Missouri and across the nation.
Police spokesman says the governor's security staff arrived at the scene crash when the governor appeared to be missing. By the middle of the night, confirmation came from family sources that the governor, his son, and campaign manager were killed in the crash.
In pouring rain, and we got there, and Mom was there, and we just tried to hold on to each other.
I'm Mel Carnahan. As governor, I helped create a prescription drug tax credit for Missouri seniors, but we need to do more. In the U.S. Senate,
in the final sprint of a heated 2000 campaign cycle, Missouri politics stood still.
During this time of mourning, I have directed that all campaign activities cease.
The day after the plane crash, Republican Senator John Ashcroft, who was running against Carnahan to keep his seat, temporarily halted his campaign. But the campaign for president continued that day, with a final debate in Missouri, no less, at Washington University in St. Louis.
Tipper and I were good friends with Mel and Randy, and I know that all of us here want to extend our sympathy and condolences to Gene and the family and to the Sifford family.
I too want to extend my prayers to the and blessings, God's blessings on the families whose lives were overturned last night. It was a tragic moment.
A moment no more personal to anyone than Gene Carnahan, Mel's widow. Former Associated Press reporter Scott Charton spoke to her as part of a series of interviews he did years later to archive the history of the plane crash and the 2000 Senate race.
It seems like we were next, the most immediate thing we were thrown into is planning 3 funerals within as many days. And so it just seemed like there was something to do all the time. And people have often said to me, you didn't have time to grieve. And I said, that's right, I didn't. I had to take the next step. I had to do what was the next thing in front of me, and kind of like Mel would have done.
I remember the day of the governor's casket coming to the mansion. Jean Carnahan appeared at the top of the stairs from the family quarters. And we all looked up, and she was there, and just this dignified, serene figure. And Jim Mathewson, the Senate President Pro Tem, was standing near me, and he said, "What is she made of?"
Mel Carnahan's memorial service was in Jefferson City 4 days after the plane crash. Speakers included the president.
I thought when we marched behind the casket today, and the magnificent horse with the boot turned backwards in the stirrups, that in a way it was fitting that our friend Mel died in the saddle with his boots on, fighting for the causes he championed and the people of Missouri whom he loved so much and served so well.
As poignant as Clinton's words were, the most impactful speech that day didn't come from Carnahan's friend, the president. It came from Carnahan's daughter.
Because every morning Dad would get up early and light the fire. And he'd always bring in extra wood, and it was wood that Randy had cut. And he'd leave it next to the fireplace. And without fail, before he walked out the door in the morning to go to work, he'd say, "Don't let the fire go out." So I'm here today to say, Dad, we promise we won't let the fire go out.
Robin Carnahan, the daughter, gave a very eloquent eulogy, coining the phrase, "Don't let the fire go out." And I remember I was in my office in Jefferson City, and of course it was carried on every television station in the state and on the radio. It was everywhere. And I remember listening to that service, and I thought, okay, that's the election right there.
Democrats had a slogan, but they didn't have a candidate. It was legally too late to replace Mel Carnahan on the ballot. Roger Wilson, who was the lieutenant governor before becoming governor after Carnahan's death, said he'd nominate Jean to the Senate if Mel posthumously won. But Jean was hesitant to accept after just losing her husband, her son, and her dear friend.
When we cut the commercial, and Saul came in for us to cut the commercial, and so he said, we're going to do 2 commercials, and then because I hadn't made up my mind. And he says, we're going to do one in which you say yes, and then we're going to do one in which you say no. And so we did the first one, in which I said yes, and then we stopped so that I could have something to drink and pause and so forth. And Saul says, okay, let's get ready. We're ready to do the second one. And I said, no, let's go with the first. And everybody in the room applauded.
A few weeks later, Mel Carnahan, a dead man, was elected to the Senate. Jean filled the seat. John Ashcroft would go on to become U.S. Attorney General after George W. Bush's victory, and Jean Carnahan would later lose in the special election in 2002 to serve the remainder of the Senate term. All of these people have been out of the political spotlight for many years, and Jean passed away early last year. But today, in a dark old TV news studio, in between someone who learned it and someone who lived it, is a window into this history. A history through which is revealed tragedy.
There were no survivors.
But also hope.
The moment will age, the people will age, we will age. But it sounds like the lessons won't.
They fulfilled the idea and held up as an ideal that it's good to serve in public service. Honest public service is something to aspire to. It's a nonpartisan lesson. It's a lesson to think about that we can have leaders who are about selfless service.